Hi guys, and welcome to another Q&A video. This is Q&A video number 4. We've had some more questions, and so we're going to get straight into it and answer question number 1. So question number 1 is from Thomas, and he says, can I have your 12th Doctor t-shirts? The answer to that is no, Tom, you can't have my t-shirts. The 2 t-shirts in question are the 2 Label Lab Misty Mountain and Negative Flower t-shirts seen in Series 9. They no longer sell them, and the t-shirts are actually replicated, and you can get them on Redbubble. I think they're £16, so if you're looking for those t-shirts, that would be the best place to go, as they probably don't come up on eBay, as they're very rare. So question number 2 is from Emelina, and she says, when will the audio series be making a comeback on the channel? Now, the audio series has sort of taken a bit of a back burner recently with the props I've been making and the cons I've been going to, and with work. So it's still in the stage of being made, it's still being edited, it's still being rewritten in parts, there is still audio that needs to be edited, so it's still that stage of not being ready to be uploaded. Part of that will be to the fact that I've not had audio actors to be able to do the parts. Some of that will be down to finding certain sound effects to make it sound good. Part of it will be, part of the editing process will be that you're listening to it and actually you're finding bits that you're not keen on. Parts that actually, when you've written it down, it sounds good, but then when it's audio it doesn't necessarily sound quite right. So there is still editing to do on it. I'll just put a snippet up here, and you can see that that is episode 1 of series 2, and there's not all the audio there. There is still parts that are missing. There is still music to be added, there is still sound effects to be added, there is still audio that needs tweaking so it sounds correct. So there is a lot of things that still need to be done before it's to a point where it's finished and ready to be uploaded. So, question number 3 comes from Type 40 Productions, and he says, any tips on building TARDIS walls? Now, this will all depend on what type of TARDIS walls you're looking to build. If you're looking at classic TARDIS walls, the way they were originally made was with fiberglass and with just normal MDF or plywood. They were cut out circles and then backed. You could do that quite easily with some perspex, some clear plastic plates, and then just cut out holes and then mount them on the back. My ones here are made using MDF on board, which are mounted onto CLS timber, so CLS goes there, down the middle and on the other side. The hexagons are then cut out, and then the actual hexagonal roundels themselves are made using cardboard, polystyrene bowls and clear plastic bowls in the middle of that. And I think in total the walls probably cost me probably about £25–30. The wallpaper was about £7, which is textured on there. So there's lots of different bits and pieces that were involved to make that, but again, you can see they're lit up as well. Not very well in this light, but they do work quite effectively in the dark. Again, the 2010 roundels, they were actually using plant pots, so that's another route you could go down if you wanted some sort of 3D style walls. The 2013 roundels were the neck rings for the 2010 Daleks, the Paradigm ones, as they no longer use them, and they put some lighting behind those and a Land Rover light, the indicator lights in the middle of those, and that's what was used for those. The classic roundels, after sort of the 3rd Doctor up to the 7th Doctor, were actually moulded, and they had like a step look to them on the roundel. So you can do that using plaster and fiberglass, but that does get quite expensive, so it's not necessarily something you'd want to be able to try and do, as it's not the easiest process. So there are specific ways that you could do it. As I say, one of the things I've thought about if you were making classic roundels would, as I say, would be to use the perspex. You could also use, I've seen some people use paper plates, some people have used metal tins, some people would use the pot lids off of 10-litre pots of paint or buckets. So there are a few different ways in which you can make your roundels look effective. So Z Stivers 2002 says, I'm trying to build a console like yours with the War Doctor variant, but there is too much to think about how to start. Where should I begin first? So that will all depend on how you're planning to make it, what you're planning to make it from, how big you're planning to make it. There are a few different steps in looking at it. One would be, I would say, look at reference images. Now the War Doctor console is a little bit tricky to do that with, as there are not many close-ups of the console. The original console which they used for the War Doctor console was actually a touring console they used for promotional use, and it was smaller than the original Tennant console, and the components on there were more or less the same. There were a few bits and pieces that were they were the same type of thing, but not quite. And there were some which they had duplicates of, and they put on the same sort of both consoles. So there are different ways in which you can make it. I've made mine originally with MDF, and the MDF wasn't quite strong, so plywood was the way I went. And these are made using the same method that the BBC used. If you look in the, I think it's the Impossible Worlds book, there's actually some pictures in there of the bones, the bare bones skeleton of the TARDIS console when they were building it. The console itself, my one is probably the same size as the War Doctor's console, as it's 2/3 scale rather than full scale. The console itself was about 6 foot. Mine is actually 2/3 scale. It's about 4 foot wide, and so that's about the right size for the console. The original War Doctor console had 3 screens rather than just the one. In the episodes, they actually just took off the other 2 screens, as it was meant to be an interactive display. There were things like the phone, the DMAT lever, one of the panels that was mounted to the bottom of the screen here. So there was a few bits and pieces they had that were the same as the original, but I think the way they built it was exactly the same as the original console. So I would look at reference images, I would look at how big you're going to make it, I would draw up plans. I would then also look at the components you can buy, because as I say, there are a few bits on the console that you could recognise that are easily recognisable, but then there are also parts which you wouldn't have seen on the console because they were just parts that the BBC had knocking around when they built it, because it wasn't made to be an accurate replica of the original console. So it will all depend on what you can get hold of. Obviously it will depend on that, and then sort of looking at how you're going to put it together. So Harry05 Webster has said, would you make the 8th Doctor's TARDIS console? I quite like all of the consoles, and the 8th Doctor's is certainly up there, and it's very steampunky, which I quite like. But I've already got this console, and this takes up a little bit of room, and trying to make another console, I just wouldn't have the time or the money or the effort to do it. I love the console itself, but as I say, the console itself takes up quite a lot of room, and also the fact that it was made in America and the parts on there are not easy to get hold of. It would be a lot of fabrication work to try and make the parts look like the original, if not trying to find some of the original ones, and so yeah, it's not the easiest of things to do. There's a lot of intricate parts on the console which would be really difficult to replicate without a lot of time and effort put into it. So that would be my answer to that. And finally, Cosplay Gamer 907 asks, how long did it take to build my 9th and 10th Doctor's console? So the console, I've answered this I think previously in a video, and the console I originally started with was when the show started in 2005, and it was originally a washing basket which I covered in paper. I used some belts, I used some checkers pieces, I used a paint pot and a Dyson cylinder, and that was essentially my first console. Unfortunately no pictures of that exist, which I thought they did, but they don't. But it was more a round version of the first Doctor's console than what it was an Eccleston Tennant console. I progressed through the years, changing the way I made it, changing the materials I use, and updating bits and pieces that I could use for the console. Luckily I've had the sort of parts, I've been able to pick them up either quite cheaply, or I've been able to fabricate them quite easily. So some of the parts on the console are screen accurate, some of them are just made up to look like the originals. So it's still an ongoing process. The rim on the console is going to be replaced with a proper wooden one. This is just cardboard and mod rock and paper mache. The rotor I hope to get moving at some point. I think there's a few other parts on the console that I'd like to get redone. The panelling, the clear panels are still quite small, as they were off of my previous model of the console, which was smaller. And so they're going to be replaced with some more perspex, and I'm going to hopefully try and make the ice cracked panels look a little bit better. So there are bits on the console that's still being remade and updated, so it's an ongoing project. So it's a project that's been going on for 13 years. So there's sort of, I think anyone who owns a TARDIS or a TARDIS console, they will always tell you it's something that's always an ongoing project. And the same with some of the props I've made. They will be projects that I start and I'll get to a point where I finished it and then actually find that I want to do it a different way and make it a different way or improve it. So you're never really done with a prop or a costume. There's always something that you can improve upon, and it's very rare that you ever get to a point where you're completely finished with it. So that's all the questions for this video. If you haven't already, you can hit that subscribe button. It means a lot to know that people are interested in the videos and are watching. You can also follow my Instagram at BioDoctor900, and you can also follow my Facebook page at BioDoctor900props. I'll link those in the description down below. And if you've got any questions you'd like to ask, then please leave them in the comments below. So if you've enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. As I say, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And cheers for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.